Welcome to episode 9 of the AI for Churches podcast. In today's episode, we'll be sharing some AI tools we've explored for video editing and give our take on a recent podcast from Ed Stetzer and Scott Ray from Biola University, who shared their concerns about how pastors might use AI for preaching. And I recently sat down for a conversation with David Kroll, the CEO of Churchome, and you'll hear his take on the importance of technology in a world of AI. Let's get started.
Welcome to the AI for Churches podcast. Our goal is to equip pastors and church leaders with resources related to artificial intelligence, helpful for sermon prep, creative ministries, outreach, and more. We do this by providing exclusive insights from AI experts, church leaders, and innovators actively leveraging AI to amplify the gospel and reach more people for Jesus Christ. Here are your hosts, Bart Blair and Dr. David Thorne.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the AI for Churches podcast. My name is Bart Blair, and I am joined by Dr. David Thorne. David, welcome to the AI for Churches podcast.
Hi, Bart.
Now, David, neither you nor I are strangers to the AI for Churches podcast. We've both been guests on the AI for Churches podcast in recent months, but we're not the normal hosts. So if our guests who are listening and they were expecting Cassandra Robinson, they might be sorely disappointed, or maybe they won't. I don't know. But we thought that we should probably take a couple of minutes to explain what we're doing here as the hosts of the AI for Churches podcast. Bart Blair, David Thorne, team members at Missional Marketing, and we're going to be the new hosts of this show. Cassandra Robinson started the show about 4 months ago, earlier in 2022. And we want to thank her for getting things rolling, just off to a really strong start, helped us kind of get the show on the map. But as we began to sort of develop more internally our plans and our strategies at Missional Marketing for AI for Churches, you and in particular, your role with our team has become more and more prominent in that AI for Churches space. And we decided it was a good opportunity to transition you into a little bit more of an outward-facing opportunity to share with people in the church space what you're learning about AI. So I'll tell a little bit of my story here in just a moment, but why don't you share with our audience kind of who you are, what your role is, and why AI for Churches is so important to you?
Yeah, so I work at Missional Marketing, and I help lead our research and development department, where we are like the crazy scientists of missional marketing. So think of us in a white lab coat exploding things, but like in a good way for churches. And that's what we do. And although I don't actually have a white lab coat, a metaphorical white lab coat, if you will.
Yeah.
And so about a year and a half ago, as AI exploded on the scene, we immediately knew that this was not like a joke. This was a 5-alarm, amazing, world-changing thing that was happening, and so Missional Marketing jumped on it right away. And so over the past 8 months, we've been delving quite deeply into AI to figure out how can AI help the church. And so that's been my role at Missional Marketing, to help us navigate that topic and question.
Awesome. And we're excited to dive in deeply with you and maybe blow some things up in the process. I think you used the word explode like 3 or 4 times when you were sharing that with us, but we don't plan to blow anything up. But hopefully this podcast doesn't blow up with us doing it. I am also on the Missional Marketing team. I am the lead digital marketing coach and also the co-host of the Missional Marketing podcast, something that I really enjoy getting to do. And I was a guest on the AI for Churches podcast in one of the earliest episodes. And the honest truth is, in that episode, I shared that I really hadn't spent a whole lot of time using AI. It was something that was still relatively new to me. I have an interest in it. I'm a pastor. I'm a church planter. And of course, I'm deeply embedded in the church and digital marketing space, but really hadn't explored a whole lot of AI stuff. And the honest truth is, I'm kind of along for the ride with you hopefully my ignorance and lack of understanding of AI will lead me to asking you and perhaps some of the guests that we have on the show some really good questions that maybe our audience members are asking because, well, I'm probably in the same boat as most of them. I'm just a pastor, a church leader who's trying to figure out what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong, what's helpful, what's not when it comes to AI and the way that churches should or shouldn't be leveraging artificial intelligence to help their churches grow or reach more people for Jesus. So hopefully that's what we're able to do in the context of this podcast. Now, we're changing up format a little bit with what we're doing. And one of the things that we're doing that we're going to continue doing is interviews. In fact, we have an interview today that you've recently done that you'll be sharing, you'll be teeing up here shortly. But some of the other things that we want to do as we sort of step into each of these episodes is just share with our audience some things that we're learning about AI and also some observations that we might make about the way churches and other church leaders are approaching or what they're learning about AI. And this was sort of your idea. You wanted to talk specifically about some products or some things that we might have used, some AI tools. And so why don't you tee us up for this part of our conversation today with a new product or a new resource that's artificially intelligent that maybe we have been using or maybe some of our audience has used or is unaware of?
Yeah, that's one of our things we want to try to do each week. And each time that we record an episode is, can we share a practical AI tool that maybe you've never heard of that we've tried? So Bart and I are going to commit to trying stuff out. And the thing that I tried out this past recently is something called Biteable. Like if a thing you wanted to bite it and you were able to do so, it is called Biteable.com.
Okay.
And what Biteable.com is you log in and you get a prompt. Well, first you choose what kind of video are you trying to create? So it could be promoting something, explaining something, selling something, what are you trying to create? And then once you choose it, it gives you a prompt and it says, tell me what you want to create. And so you write a paragraph or two about what you want to create, the details of it, hit create, and it, boom, creates like 8 or so video type slides of what you're trying to create. And then you can very easily go in those, upload your own stuff, tweak stuff, move things around. It's very easy. I just thought it was actually really cool if you're trying to create a quick, like 30, 90 second, 2-minute video. It really gets you down the path pretty fast. So I thought it was really cool.
That's very interesting. In terms of editability of the videos once they've been created by Biteable, we may have fun just talking about the names of some of the AI products and services that we come across. But in terms of editability, did you play around much with it? Like once the videos and your different options were created, could you go and manipulate them or massage them to look more or feel more like what you might want to do? Did you have branding capability? Would you be able to brand it if you were a church to make it brandable?
Yes, that is a potential weakness of it. Is what it gives you is four main types of feels, like a modern, like 4 different backgrounds. And if for a church, it's what I would say is if you like one of those 4 main backgrounds, then out of the box, it could be a great thing for you. If you don't like one of those 4 main background types, then it may not be a good fit for you in what you're doing. But that's the extent to which you can edit the backgrounds.
Okay. So, but I would guess if Biteable is going to be worth their weight in anything, that they will be working on better ways to, customize the videos, because that's ultimately what people are going to want to be able to do. Wouldn't you think?
Oh yeah. Because there's all kinds, like you can add new screens that look different ways. But the main thing is just saying when you use the AI specific piece, it gives you 4 different feels.
Okay.
and you have to choose one of those four.
Is Biteable a free tool, or is it a paid tool, or is there a free version and a paid version? Do you remember?
I do remember it. So it is free to, I believe, to create your first video, and then you can share the link to that video. But if you want to download it and do something else with it, then it costs money. And it was something, I think it is like $49 a month. So it's not cheap.
Yeah.
But it is interesting. And I have begun the process of looking into what are some other video AI software that's similar to Biteable. And when I find something awesome, I'll share it.
Okay, cool. Well, the video tool that I used, which has been a couple of weeks since I did, and I actually shared it with you because I'm like, hey, have you heard of this before? And you were like, yes, I have, because, well, as I said before, you've been digging around in the AI space a lot more than I have. And it is a platform called Vidyo, but it's spelled Vidyo, Vidyo.AI. And this is, there might be actually some churches and church leaders who have actually experimented with platforms similar to Vidyo. You can take a sermon and you can upload a sermon, a longer form video to the platform. And then it will actually select, I think it was four. I think it might have been four. It was either 4 or 8 short clips to be able to use on social media. And you can select whether you want them to be vertical or you want to be the horizontal. And then it will actually create the captions, creating a transcript for you and captions for those actual videos. So if you have a sermon and you want to create sermon shorts, little snippets of your sermon to share on social media, it's a tool that could be used for that. Now, there's a free version and a paid version. I was using the free version. And what I discovered with the free version is that while you can do some editing, it's limited in the free version what you can actually do. Because I didn't go into the paid version, I'm not 100% sure how much further you can take it. But overall, it was actually pretty decent. I think I uploaded like one of my old sermons from a sermon that I preached like 5 years ago. And it gave me like 8 clips. And out of the 8 clips, I would say 2 of them were usable. 6 of them just were wonky in terms of the content that they selected, because as a pastor, some things out of context are just not going to work. It needs to have the context. And if you're trying to keep these clips down to like 60 seconds each, sometimes it's a little bit difficult. So out of the 8 it gave me, there were 2 that were sort of usable. It got the transcript probably about 95% correct. But you can go in and you can actually edit the copy so that it actually gets your words correct, so that there aren't any bad words or swear words or something that you didn't really say showing up on the screen, which would be very important. But that was my experience with Vidyo.AI.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where in our Facebook group, AI for Churches, recently I put in a poll for what kind of sermon snippet tool people are using. And the winner, number 1 was Sermon Shots. Number 2 was Opus Clip. And then I don't know if anyone mentioned using Vidyo.AI. But one of these days, what I'm going to do is take one sermon, put it into all the platforms, and then see which one kind of gives out the best stuff. Oh, Munch. The other one was Munch.ai. So
Biteable, Munch. I'm getting hungry.
I know.
Okay. All right.
I know. Yeah. So for those of you out there who are considering snippets, creating sermon snippets, and you're not sure what to use, those are a few ones you can try out. And one of these times, I'm going to do a full-on compare all of them, and I will report to you what I find.
That would be very cool. And so now there are people that are listening to this going, I would love to have David's job. I would love to just be able to go and play with AI tools all day. So what David will do is he'll go and do the homework for us and then tell us what tools we ought to be using. So very cool. Well, hopefully we'll link to both of those platforms, Biteable and Vidyo, in the show notes. So if you want to go check those out, try them out, maybe it will be worth maybe it'll be worth it for you. And hey, if you try them out, make sure that if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, leave us a comment and let us know how it went for you. Just scroll down to the comment section there. And if you try one of those platforms, give us your feedback. And we'd love to know what your thoughts are. Maybe there's something else that you're using for these types of content, this type of content creation that we didn't mention here. Share the links to those with us in the comments on the YouTube channel. Let's turn our conversation here, David. About I don't know, a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, I shared with you a podcast episode of the New Churches podcast that I listened to. And before we get into this conversation, I just want to say this: Ed Stetzer, who is the host of the New Churches podcast, and it is someone that I have looked up to in the church planting space for many, many years. And I don't want this next part of our conversation to sound like I am throwing shade at Ed Stetzer in any way, shape, or form, because I hold him in very, very high respect as a pastor, a church leader, thought leader, church planter, just all around amazing guy. Never met him in person, would love to someday, but really, really high respect for Ed Stetzer. And the person that he had on the New Churches podcast interview is a guy named Scott Ray, who has multiple roles at Biola University and credentials out the wazoo. Like, just the letters that come after his name it'd be bigger than my whole resume. Like these are like super high level guys who had a conversation about the use of AI, specifically ChatGPT. I think that was what mostly what they were talking about, because that's obviously that ChatGPT is kind of like the Kleenex of AI or the Q-tip of AI. You're using ChatGPT, which you're using another platform, but that's kind of the default. And I shared the podcast recording with you because as I was listening to it, I was getting a little bit frustrated with sort of their take on the use of AI as it relates to sermon writing. And then you listened to it and you emailed to me, and I could read in the email that you sent that you were pretty mad about their approach as well. So why don't we just kind of talk through some of the talking points that they hit, and then we'll just sort of share our thoughts. And again, I'm just going to say, we're not trying to say that we're smarter, wiser, or any better than Ed Stetzer and Scott Ray. We just have a little differing opinion, or maybe a lot differing opinion, on the approach to AI as it relates to sermon writing. So how do you want to start? How do you want to start addressing this one?
Well, echoing what you said, that those Ed Stetzer, it's he's like George Washington of church stuff, or I don't know, something like that.
Yeah.
But the reason why this podcast is so important to touch on is because I feel like the sentiment shared in the podcast echoes a very common sentiment that's shared in the church today across other podcasts, across articles, all this stuff. And so we need to kind of pause and let's share what talking points that they said, and then kind of speak to what is it that we feel differently. So
okay,
maybe we should start by saying, like, what are some kind of like, what is it that they said? You want me to just kind of share a few things?
Yeah. You've got a few bullet points written down here. What are some of the bullet points that that you wrote down that they expressed concerns over?
Yeah. So the first thing that Ed did in the interview was he asked ChatGPT to write an Ed Stetzer sermon. Now, this is such a common first use case, like first thing that people go to. They say, what about AI in the church? Let me have it write a sermon for me. And I'll come back to that point. So I'll mention a few just kind of over. I want to come back to that. But a few other things were a fear of plagiarism, of saying, like, if you say that you did something that it wasn't your words, it was somebody else's, then there's a pretty big fear of the topic of plagiarism. One point that they made is that to kind of offset that pretty significant fear of plagiarism, you should make sure you disclose to the congregation as an idea. They're not saying you have to do this, but one way you can combat that fear disclosing to the congregation anytime that you are using an AI for your sermon research. And they kind of left with the church should be very cautious, because in the end, the fear of and the temptation to use AI to do more than it should, to like write your sermon for you and do everything for you, is so great that you may not be able to stand up against it. And then, should you use it? Should you not? That's kind of where they landed the plane.
Okay. Yeah. And
Was
I know
I missed?
No, I think that was pretty good. I think that, I think that your concerns are a little bit different than mine. So one of the things that you're going to hit on here in just a moment, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to drill down on this, is that you're essentially saying that their approach to the way that they're using the tool is wrong. They're using it for the wrong things. And I agree with you on that. I will say there were a couple of things that sort of rubbed me the wrong way. And one of them was, as both of them were sharing about their concerns, it seems like their primary concern is that pastors are going to stop doing the work of studying the scriptures and preparing a sermon. They're going to have AI write a sermon for them, and they're going to stand up in front of their congregation on Sunday and read the sermon that was written for them and pretend that it was their own. That's like worst case scenario. And that's where their tendency was to think that this is how pastors are going to use this. I will say this. I'm around a lot of churches. I've been around a lot of pastors. And I honestly, the best pastors, the best communicators, the best preachers that I know would never depend on a tool like this to write the content for them, because they personalize their sermon content so much. If I can be honest, and I'm gonna throw Scott Ray under the bus, because this is what I was feeling as I was listening to it, is it was almost like he was saying, hey, listen, I never had this tool to use when I was writing sermons, and so you shouldn't have it either. You should have to write the sermon the same way I wrote the sermon, which is wrestling with the text and letting God reveal to you what God's going to reveal to you. And if you're not wrestling with the text, there's no way that the Holy Spirit can use what you're preaching on Sunday. And so to me, there was sort of this generational challenge, which was, hey, we didn't have cars when I was a kid, so you should have to walk everywhere you go to, or ride a horse, right? That was kind of, again, I know that sounds very extreme, but that was the feeling that I got when I was listening to him. It's like, well, he's basically saying you got to discount the technology because you can't do it authentically and spirit-led in using the technology. Now, I will pivot on that and say you and I actually had a conversation on the Missional Marketing podcast, the other podcast that I host. And one of the things that I highlighted is the fact that there's a difference between AI generated content and AI assisted content. And I think that's really where you're going to go with talking about how people can better use AI tools. But it's one thing for me to have ChatGPT or Claude write a sermon for me and have me stand up there and read it. That is content generated by AI versus me using the tools to improve or to find examples or to, use illustrations. Here's an illustration. Here's an example of something that I used it for recently, and something that actually would respond to Ed and Scott in their discussion, is that I was putting together a sermon outline for something completely out in left field. And I asked Claude to give me an illustration or a story that reflected this one certain concept that I was trying to put together in the sermon outline. And Claude gave me this really interesting story about this woman, and I won't go into all the details of it. And as I was reading it, I was like, that actually fits really well. But the first question that I thought was, I wonder if this is actually a true story. So I left Claude and I went to Google and I Googled this person's name to find more articles and more resources on the actual event that took place, because there was no way I was going to include this story in my outline if I couldn't verify that it was true. I wasn't going to just leave it to the AI tool to tell me that this was a true story because, well, I'm just going to say I'm a little more mature and a little more skeptical than that. And I want to do my due diligence as a pastor and as a preacher to make sure that I'm not communicating something that is false. Even though it's not scripturally based, it's something that the AI tool put together for me. I'm still going to go fact check it, right? I'm still going to go do my homework. So those are some of the things that I was listening to the podcast. I mean, the general feeling was, well, I didn't have this when I was a pastor growing up, so you shouldn't have it as a pastor now, and you should have to do it the old school way. And the reality is, when Logos software came out and pastors were able to own all the books without owning all the books, I'm sure that there were pastors who went, no, you should have to go and buy the hard copies of all those books and have a bookshelf that completely fills your office. And you should have to go find, read all the books and highlight all the content, and you got to know it yourself. But Logos has made it a lot easier for us to access content in books without having to own all the books in physical copy or to read all of the books in physical copy. So I'll stop there and I'll let you kind of dive into some of the things that you wanted to highlight. Yeah.
Well, on that note, Bart, here's what I feel about that specific thing you just mentioned about, the use of AI as a tool. I firmly believe that whatever you did in your sermon writing process before AI, you are going to do that after AI. I was talking with a friend and we're talking about coming up with Bible study questions and using AI for that. And I was like, oh yeah, well, I mean, I'm guessing if you, I said, sometimes if I'm writing questions, I'm seeking the Lord, asking what about these questions? Other times they're just good questions. And he was kind of like, well, when do you always seek the Lord as part of your writing? And that kind of led us to, I guess whether you use AI or not, you're probably going to do the same process. If you seek the Lord and you're contemplative about what you're writing before AI, then AI is just a tool that becomes a part of your process, and you're going to do that after AI. I just wanted to mention that point.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it was you that said something to this effect. One of the things that Ed and Scott said in the podcast is, well, if you use AI, you should disclose it to your congregation. Well, do you disclose to your congregation every reference book or commentary that you read? I mean, I have listened to some of the most gifted expository preachers preach things, and then a short time later read a commentary and went, oh, he just preached that commentary. And I didn't think less of him because some guy 100 years ago had a great study on this content and wrote it in a commentary. And now somebody in 2022 or 2023 is preaching it. And, I'm learning from it. Was it his own revelation from God when he was studying the text? No, but it was a revelation from God when he was studying the commentary. God put those pieces together for him. I don't disclose that, well, I put this list of passages together for this sermon because, well, I used Google to help me, cross-reference these. Or I use the Blue Letter Bible all the time to look up Greek and Hebrew, and I use the tool in there. And I don't have an MDiv. I didn't study Greek and Hebrew, and I'm not going to pretend, but I'm not also every single time I'm doing expository preaching and I'm talking about the Greek or the Hebrew of a text, I'm not going to go, and I looked this up on the Blue Letter Bible, and this is what I discovered, right? I'm not going to do that. And so again, we're not saying plagiarism is bad. Let's say that. David and I would both agree that plagiarism is bad. Stealing from other people is bad. Claiming something that is your own that isn't your own is bad. And I think, the worst examples of that is when people tell personal stories as if it was something that happened to them, but it actually happened to somebody else. That's bad. So we're not condoning plagiarism. But why don't you talk a little bit about how you would envision pastors using artificial intelligence to assist in writing their sermons?
Yeah, well, I want to just end that one thought to say, if you're going to impose the law of Sesame Street to your sermon, of today's sermon is brought to you by the letter A, by, a Google search on the topic of then you need to apply the law of Sesame Street equally across every single tool you used for your sermon, and not just pick out AI. Bart, I actually want to back up because the topic of sermons comes up so much. I have to share this. Okay. When you go and you say, let's talk about AI in sermons. Oh, it wrote a sermon. You're using it wrong. And that analogy itself is wrong. And so I asked ChatGPT to come up with 5 examples of using products incorrectly to discourage their use. So for example, using a laptop as a cutting board. So someone might use a laptop as a makeshift cutting board for chopping vegetables, and then caution against using laptops for work or entertainment because laptops are terrible cutting boards. We needed more dedicated surfaces for cooking. Or using a bicycle as a snowplow. Imagine using an attempt to clear snow from a driveway by attaching a shovel to a bicycle and pedaling through the snow. And then advising against using bicycles for transportation because bicycles are useless for snow removal and we need better, proper snowplows. I could go on and on. Using a smartphone as a hammer, vacuum cleaner for hairstyling, or using a refrigerator as a plant growth chamber, and then saying refrigerators are useless because they're not good for growing plants. And that brings us back to sermons.
Wait a minute. You're going to call out the poor vacuum cleaner. What about the Flowbee? Don't you remember the Flowbee, which literally was a vacuum cleaner that cut hair, and it worked?
Well, but did it work?
Okay,
but,
well, we'll call that was not artificially intelligent. It was a very unintelligent move on behalf of hairstyle. Okay, sorry, I digress. That was the first thing that came to my mind was the Flowbee. Not that you or I have used a Flowbee for quite a long time, but that's the point.
Sometimes I wish I could go to a barber. I miss having going to a barber, getting a haircut. We are bald. Bart and I, for those of you who are just listening, we are follically challenged.
Yes.
On our heads. And so, yes. Okay. So the reason I want to hit this so hard and hit this again is because I want our listeners to be smarter about this topic. When you hear somebody talk about AI and they immediately go to a not helpful use case, I want you to say, no, that is not a reasonable way to use the AI. Let's talk about all the amazing things that AI can do, hopefully. Which brings us back to your question, because you asked, I believe, before I went on my little journey there. Thanks for going with me. You were asking ways to use AI.
Yeah, like if I'm going to use it, let's stay in the context of sermon prep. What are some things that AI can do to help me prepare a sermon that isn't necessarily having AI write the sermon for me?
Yeah. When you start your sermon prep on say Monday morning, and this is before the freaking out and looking for stories in your kids, you're waiting for people at the mall to do weird things, before the end of the week kind of stuff. On Monday morning, you have a blank page, and you're sitting there saying, I have a topic. Well, a great way to use AI is ask it ideas for sermon titles, engage it with your brainstorming process. That can be, help me find Bible verses on a topic, help me find stories on the Bible about a topic, help me think about even a sermon outline. And if I was going to talk on this topic, what are things I need to consider and think about? Just go crazy during that first phase of your sermon prep, which is just ideation. You're throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing which spaghetti piece is the Holy Spirit.
Okay. All right. So brainstorming is a place that we can start. What beyond that? Are there other things that you think could aid in my sermon prep? Any other tools or any other tasks I could assign to AI?
Yeah. So you can ask it to help you find stories. You can ask it for research related things. I have found surprisingly that ChatGPT knows Greek and Hebrew. And so you can ask it for help and identifying, tell it a passage and ask it for key Greek and Hebrew interlinear explanations and words. You could even say if there's a passage of scripture and you're just having trouble figuring out how to explain it in common language, maybe put in that Bible verse and say, how would you explain this verse as a pastor of an evangelical church to a high schooler or to a middle schooler? And that itself could start giving you some ideas of how to talk about specifically like difficult passages or topics.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. Here's an idea that I thought of is that I know a lot of pastors will preach from a transcript or not a transcript, but a, what do you call it? When you write out your whole sermon, manuscript, that's the word I was looking for, a manuscript.
Yeah,
preach from a manuscript. Don't preach from a transcript because that means you've taken what somebody else said and you're preaching what they preached.
Yeah.
A manuscript. You can write your manuscript and then you can actually throw that into Claude would probably be my default, and have Claude give you pointers on things that might be unclear. Have it help you improve the way that you state certain points. It might be, one of the things that I've always said is I don't want to preach at a post-secondary level in terms of the language that I use. I want to understand that the vast majority of people that are in my church probably read at an 11th or 12th grade level. And therefore, when I'm preaching, I want to preach in language that can be understood by a high schooler. So I might have the AI tool review my manuscript and tell me where I'm speaking in vocabulary or in sentence structure that wouldn't be easy to understand by a high schooler, right? And so those are some things that I thought of that I might use it for. I don't preach from a manuscript today. I used to a long time ago, but I do know a lot of pastors do preach from a manuscript.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
What other thoughts do you have? I mean, obviously, we could go into all kinds of things as it relates to using the AI to come up with, discussion questions for your small groups, right?
Yeah.
It's a great way, a great way to use AI. Once you've written your sermon, whether you put an outline together or you write from a manuscript, you can feed that to the platform and ask it to create discussion questions. There are AI tools that you can use to create your visuals, right? Your PowerPoint or any visual images that you want to use. What are some other things that in sermon prep you might coach a pastor to do in terms of AI tools and things that they could use?
Well, I kind of feel like we've filled people's buckets with really cool ideas. I think that's kind of a good place to pause because we actually could talk about this a very, very long time, and just brainstorming together, we could come up with 10 more ideas. Maybe on a future podcast, we'll say, all right, we are going to sit down and come up with 15 use cases for something, and we'll have to brainstorm that out together.
That's a good idea. And I'm actually confident that there's somebody listening to this or watching on our YouTube channel who has other ideas that we haven't come up with. Again, use the chat, the comments section on our YouTube channel to give us some thoughts. You can give us your feedback. You can tell us that you think that we're onto something, or maybe you think we're off base. We'd love to have some dialogue with you so that you can, so we can learn from you. We're all in this together. We're all trying to learn how to use these things together, and we want to be good stewards with these tools that we have at this season in the life on planet Earth. So thanks again for tuning in to this episode 9 of the AI for Churches podcast. David, you recently sat down with another David and did an interview. You want to cue up this conversation before we roll the interview?
Yes. And for the record, I love meeting other Davids. They tend to be very nice people. So I had an interview with David Kroll, the CEO of Churchome. And we had a cool conversation just talking about the importance of technology in a world of AI. So yeah, it's a pretty cool convo.
All right. Well, thanks again for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed wherever you're listening to the podcast, make sure that you do that. If you haven't ever left us a rating and review, please do that as well. We'll turn things over to David and David, and we'll hope to be tuned in to your ears next week.
Hi, everyone. This is David Thorne here with AI for Churches, and I am here with another David Kroll of Churchome. So I was wondering, David, if you could introduce yourself and actually just tell us a little bit about Churchome and maybe what you do there.
Absolutely. So first of all, thanks for having me, David. Excited to be here and, really grateful for what you're doing as far as creating kind of narratives around some of these tools that, I think can seem scary in some senses to worlds like the church world, but in so many ways have the ability to bring so many positive things. So I'm excited to engage in the conversation today. I help lead a community called Churchome. Churchome is a church community that has existed now for 31 years, which, really realizing how different the world is today than 31 years ago. And longevity is a beautiful thing. So we're really proud of that, really grateful for our church community. Our church started out not being called Churchome. It was called the City Church, and came out of Portland, Oregon. Wendell and Jenny Smith were the founders of the church community. Judah and Chelsea, Judah being Wendell and Jenny's son, took over the church some 12, 13 years ago now. But 31 years ago, they left Portland, Oregon, felt like God was calling them to start a local church in Seattle. That church grew by the grace of God under their leadership and also under Judah and Chelsea's leadership. About 5 or 6 years ago, Judah and our board really felt it placed on their hearts that there was a big shift kind of happening in their hearts surrounding our community and then the way that we reach people. And two things really came to Judah's heart specifically, which is the fact that he felt like church should feel like a home. And we also believe that you could do church in your home or anywhere where you are across the world. A lot of people didn't like that concept when we first shared it, but that's how we went from the City Church to Churchome. The irony of that is that by March of 2020, it was our goal to pivot to be able to facilitate church no matter where you were in the globe. Our exact thematic goal in that time is to pivot to church at home. And we all know what happened in March of 2020, and the world will never be the same. And everybody went from thinking we are crazy to asking us all of a sudden, hey, what are you guys doing? How are you doing this? How are you facilitating this? And as the world has returned to normalcy, we've seen a lot of the Western church specifically kind of return, which is not bad, to the methodologies that are known and have been operated in the past. We used really the acceleration of technology within faith and faith engagement to further the tailwind that we had as a community to align to the vision that God had given us for our church community. So my role is to help lead the staff and the team within Churchome in alignment with that vision. So my technical role is CEO, and I realize that makes some people uncomfortable hearing the title CEO within a church community. All that means is I help lead the team, help lead the staff, and myself, Judah, and Chelsea all report to our board of directors and serve on one team holistically together. Judah is our communicator, our lead communicating pastor. Chelsea is kind of our lead theologian, if you will, very strategic and an incredible leader. And then I help lead the staff and the team. So that's a little flash forward of who we are as far as Churchome without getting into too many laborious details, as I'm sure we'll get there here in a second.
Yeah. But I mean, you talked about technology and faith. So that's definitely been important to the topic of AI. Before we actually jump into AI specifically, I actually have 5 hard-hitting questions I want to hit you with that are very important. Everyone wants to know. So question number 1 is this: dogs or cats?
Easy, no hesitation, dogs.
Correct answer. Number 2, favorite sports team?
The Arsenal Gunners, the one and only. 100%.
All right. And for those of us in the world who have no idea what that means, can you explain who that is?
Yes, the world's greatest soccer team, David. Arsenal in the English Premier League, currently sitting in second place, undefeated in the English Premier League, behind our rivals Tottenham Hotspurs. But yeah, they are, one of the most historic and historied soccer teams of all time. And I've always been a soccer fan. So yeah, Gunners are my team.
All right. That is a respectable answer. All right. Number 3, favorite AI tool?
This is going to be boring, but it is the one and only ChatGPT. It is heavily utilized.
Okay, let's get back to that one. Number 4, name a movie where robots take over that you like or remember.
I don't really. I kind of go into like I Am Legend is where my mind wants to go, which is not like robots or zombies. It's kind of like an apocalyptic, like, viral, like out cyborg type of a deal. So I honestly can't really think of where, I don't know what would be like. I'm not supposed to be asking the questions here, but I'm so curious what yours is, because I can't get I Am Legend into my head, which all I see is that like final scene with like Will Smith.
Yes. Now, see, you could go back all the way to squishy robots, and you could go all the way back to the 1980s for Short Circuit or Short Circuit 2. So if you're going the warm squishy route, that's a direction you could go. And of course, the classic is Terminator 2. But then there's a bunch of ones, and there's some I haven't even seen. I think there's one called like Synchronicity, where I don't even know. And I think one of the newest Mission Impossible movies includes a topic like this. So there's a bunch of different directions, but it's why it feels like when I have these podcasts, I want to bring those kind of conversations right to the surface. So we're name the elephant in the room, if you will.
This is only proof, David, that you truly are the guy to be leading the AI in Churches podcast. So
there you go.
Because I didn't even think of Terminator.
Yeah, well, that's where my mind typically goes, and I love that movie, and I think it's one of the just greatest movies. But then you have to be aware of things like the fun, squishy ones like Short Circuit. Oh, I Am Robot or iRobot. Wait, iRobot, or is that the vacuum, or is that the movie?
Roomba? I don't know.
Well, anyways,
I know what you're talking about. Oh, you know what? One of my favorite ones. This is going to be a very off. Gosh, what is it? It's a Disney movie. Oh well, I'm going to derail this whole podcast if I go down it. But do you know what I'm talking about? There's like a little cleanup robot that's on the earth, and all the human beings have left Earth while they all clean up the.
Yes.
WALL-E.
Yes.
WALL-E is my favorite. Absolutely. I love WALL-E. My wife does not like WALL-E. She thinks it's emo, but I'm into WALL-E.
All right. Well, we'll accept WALL-E as your official answer.
Thank you.
All right. Last hard-hitting question is name one task, personal or from work, that you wish an AI could help do for you.
I absolutely wish that AI would help sort and prioritize my text responses. So like when I get to my phone after back-to-back meetings or whatever I have going on, I take a look at everything, and then I eventually start to work my way top to bottom when I should probably be working bottom to top, right? It's the first person who contacted me is probably the first person I should get back to. So where like voicemail used to do that, right? It used to kind of prioritize the most, the person who left you the oldest message you would hear first. So I don't know. I think prioritizing text responses and helping even automate certain simple text responses, because I feel like I can be very bad at the immediacy of text responses. So that's just my own personal wish. We'll get there.
Those of you out there listening, we need to create for David an automated text responder, an automated David chatter responder. So that's honestly, there's probably somebody listening to this who is like, I can do that. So that's why
I guarantee you there is. It's the beauty of 2023.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's jump into AI. And what I would love to know is at Churchome, where are you guys with exploring AI tools to help you do what you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I have to back up the bus before I even get to that, which is, where technology plays a role for Churchome. I think technology is a tool, just plain and simple. Just as in the same way that when the printing press was created, it allowed Bibles to be printed and distributed across the world so people could have access to the Holy Scriptures. In the same way that when radio waves were created in the form of there actually being audible radio that we could listen to. It was used to preach the gospel and get the gospel to the ends of the earth. Same thing with television. Same thing with multi-site church. And it's really interesting to see the consistent trends with new innovation that's entering the marketplace, that's so adopted in the marketplace, yet there's hesitation consistently from a lot of different segments, not just the faith segment. I would put AI in that same category. I had a friend who works in virtual and augmented reality about a year ago. He was talking to me about VR specifically, and he was saying, David, it's really interesting. When we talk about VR, people get so freaked out, similarly to AI. And he's like, I remember my parents thinking that Facebook, he's like, when I was first on Facebook, they're like, I'm never going to use that. That's ridiculous. He's like, the irony now is I don't use Facebook and my parents use it every day. So it just goes to show the cycles and trends in society around adoption and hesitation. The way that Churchome takes a look at technology is that technology is a prolific tool to help us leverage these incredible, generous funds that we get to steward from people who generously give to the mission. And our mission, we believe, is not just to create a comfortable experience for those who already believe what we believe, in buildings that we like, with programs that we like and prefer, and music that we prefer, and a preacher that we prefer. It's not about our preference. We are still naive enough to believe that the mission is the mission. And when we took a look at our primary tool of reaching people in the 1990s and even in the 2000s, it was buildings. And that is not wrong whatsoever. It was a very good tool for us in those days. Obviously, we didn't have a lot of the tools that we have today. So we used buildings. But what we learned about our buildings is a lot of things. Number one, we learned who, even when we deemed ourselves successful, which by every means, Churchome was the pinnacle of what the Western megachurch epitomized, right? We had 7 different locations. We had over 14 different church services on any given Sunday across multiple different cities, even internationally. Giving was at all, everybody was happy, right? But as we took a look around, we were seeing statistics that were alarming, that the level of isolation, even in people who attended church buildings every Sunday, was staggering. That the level of new people actually entering into eternity by saying yes to the free gift of grace in Jesus wasn't happening in the buildings to the degree that we thought. In fact, we saw that 96% of all church growth, based off of the Christianity Today survey, was transfer growth. People going from other churches who preferred the music or the preaching or the programs or whatever it may be in church B to church A. And so the quote unquote growth was really Christians leaving one church for another church. And so it wasn't growth at all. And so as we took a look to a building of the future, even taking a look at, the Great Commission and taking a look at what we believe God calls us to do as far as reaching people, we knew that even if we were to fill, let's talk about Seattle, Washington for a moment, which has really been the epicenter of our church community from inception, is that if you take a look at the millions of people in the greater Seattle area, and we took every single auditorium and filled it to the brim on a Sunday, we still wouldn't scratch the surface of being able to reach the populace of our very own city. So we knew there were limitations to the tools that we were using in buildings. And not that they're bad. We're not going to forsake the assembling of God's people and the believers, but we knew that we could use technology to, instead of spending tens of millions of dollars on physical building assets, we could spend, and to reach hundreds, if not thousands of people, that we could spend thousands to reach millions by leveraging these tools and technology. And so we started a journey years ago within the development of our very first iteration of our app, which was really an experiment in a lot of ways. I'll be very honest with you. And our experiment really started with saying, okay, what if we took kind of the digital world and the digital building, if you will, and made church available online? It's been a great tool to help people engage in guided prayers on a daily basis, to connect with God, to connect with community members who live in places where we don't have physical locations, to engage in church experiences and help people grow in their faith. We've actually been through a very significant development cycle that we're at the very end of. I've got the beta version of our new app on my phone right now, and we're working actively on feedback. So there's a lot to discuss when it comes to AI and how we utilize that, et cetera, and how we're seeking to utilize it to better serve people. But technology is a significant tool that does not replace the things that we've used in the past. It actually only makes them more potent and gives us opportunity to eliminate barriers where people had them previously to enter into those building spaces. So That's kind of the quick zoom forward. So can you maybe re-ask the question one more time? Because I feel like that context is really significant when it comes to why it's profound for us to use AI.
And it's interesting because saying like there could be people listening that are still thinking about the idea of like moving from buildings to a post-building world where if we lived in a you must physically go to the office to work, to a post-physical work location world. And that's where it sounds like you guys are helping to think about that topic, which is awesome. It sounds like you were kind of ahead of the curve, and which is very cool.
Yeah, accidentally. To be clear, it's not like we're trying to be the out in front. It's just we felt like God was prompting us to do so, and so we did. And we didn't realize that we were stumbling at the forefront of Christendom into the unknown of what it looks like to engage people this way, which has taken a lot of learning. I mean, we're non-technical individuals stepping into a highly technical world. And so, we've got great tech partners, which have helped us along that journey. Because it's not our job. We can want to continue to be the church, to continue to serve people, to continue to have the core, we're not seeking to be a tech company. We're seeking to use tech as a church organization to reach more people with the good news of the grace of Jesus and to create community in an isolated world across the globe with these devices that can be so alienating and divisive. So,
yes.
And
so with that, so as a part of that journey, how have you guys, where are you in the journey of implementing or bringing in AI tools to help you accomplish that goal?
Great question. So much of our work that we've done in the last 3-4 years has been foundational and not very visible, even to our church community. The implementation of Salesforce, for example, right? The building of data warehouses, the building of new websites, of new apps that are about to be released. But, really having to start from ground zero within our tech blueprint, taking a look at the next decade, if not more, within technology, realizing that we were going to have to leverage some world-class tools to be able to position ourselves for not just even the AI tools of today, but what's not developed that will be available in 5 years that Churchome can leverage without having to once again start from the foundational stage and build it back up. So, Churchome, as far as our community, hasn't seen a lot of changes, but it's been because we have been in the stage preparing to utilize some of these tools to the benefit of our church community. So, where we're at today, I would say when it comes to artificial intelligence specifically, it's around taking a look at what we want to see accomplished in people's lives and how we can help them facilitate movement across that spectrum, which is measured, our faith growth, if we measure it by let's just take the largest longitudinal survey ever done in Christendom, right? Which was done out of Willow Creek back in the early 2000s, right? You got over 1,000 church communities, over 250,000 church congregants, and they're taking a look at how they measure spiritual growth, which they found out wasn't done by church programs, but it was done by the reading of scripture and prayer. And then they found a continuum on how do we measure these different buckets of where somebody's at in their faith journey, right? As measured by their love of God and their love of people. So if Churchome is taking a look at our continuum, that we're trying to see people who say, hey, I'm either brand new to this concept of Jesus, I'm curious about who he is, and that's why I'm here. Or, hi, I've been a faithful, committed church attendee of Churchome for 31 years, and I've been following Jesus for 50, and I want to continue to grow in my faith as a mature spiritual person who wants to continue to grow in my love of God and my love of others. Wherever you're at in that spectrum, we want to be able to know where you're at and how we get you to move forward in your journey. So it's not a system of stagnation, but we actually know what creates certain results in people's lives. For example, like I said, the number one way to grow in your love of God and your love of others, statistically, factually, is to pray to God and to get into the scriptures at least 4 times a week. There's something transformative to when you do that habit, even if it's 2 to 3 times a week, to 4 to 5, it is transformative as far as its implications on your personal life. So for us, one use case would be, hey, when we relaunch this app, it's taking a look at what is the average guided prayer listenership per user on a weekly basis. Is that 1.3 times a week? Okay, well, how do we get that to 4? And what kind of content can we help curate? What can we learn by this person's behavior? Can their behavior tell us that they are dealing with a high level of anxiety? And we can give them listen, scroll culture of today uses AI to feed us things that allows us to be addicted to these devices in a very non-positive way from my perspective. Mm-hmm. We can utilize those same tools for good in giving faith content and community opportunities to individuals who are trying to grow across that continuum of growing in their love of God and the love of others. So it would be through, okay, how do we help curate an experience now, customized for this one individual, not for a group of individuals, but for you specifically, David, who downloads the Churchome app? Well, we can use artificial intelligence to do that. We can learn what's going to keep you engaged, what's going to get you back tomorrow. We can figure out to the best of our ability from what we're learning about you on the platform. Now, mind you, there's also data security within this, right? And we're also very cognizant of that and not trying to get too much data on people, because that's its own can of worms that Churchome is uninterested in delving into, right? So we have people who work within AI ethics within Microsoft and others who are helping to advise us when it comes to, hey, here's the way that from an ethics perspective, the way that we should handle data, artificial intelligence, and what we learn about people. But we truly do believe that the ways in which we will leverage these tools are going to help people to connect, not just to God, but to also to community. Hey, where is this person located? Hey, at this stage in their spiritual journey, we should get them connected to other folks. They shouldn't be isolated in the way in which they're growing. And so can we prompt them with the ability and opportunity and invitation to engage with other community? Okay, hey, they said no. How long should we wait until we reprompt them? When we reprompt them, can we do it in a different way that might invite them in a different way? Okay, can we get them engaged with one of our pastors on Pastor Chat, which is a digital tool that helps people to chat live in real time, 24/7 with a pastor, no matter where you're at across the world? Will that help benefit them? So there's a multiplicity of ways in which we can do this. To be honest, the release of our app will be really phase one of taking what we learn from people, having artificial intelligence actually prompt the curated experience for an individualized user based off of where they're at and where we determine they're at in their faith continuum and how we get them to move forward and grow.
So let me ask you this. I'm going to give you a magic wand on your app. And what I'm curious about is when you guys were sitting in front of your whiteboard and dreaming up the new app, it was probably, I'm guessing it was maybe just before, like just as ChatGPT was coming on the scene or right after. So, what we could do or what was possible was still probably, being developed. But if I gave you a magic wand right this second and a whiteboard, and I said, if your app could do anything, beyond what it can do now, just, magic wand stuff, what is a magic thing that you wish a church app could do?
I had a business leader in our church community actually share this with Judah about a week ago. And he called him. He's like, hey, I was just walking down the street in downtown Seattle, and there was like hundreds, if not thousands of people passing by me. And this is a guy who's had his life transformed, didn't grow up in the church. In fact, recently had a faith conversion experience because he was using Churchome and our technology to practice his faith every day with guided prayer. He was digitally attending weekly service that we do every single week. And then on a monthly basis, he was joining us for our large in-person Churchome experience, which would be kind of what people would think of as far as a big traditional Sunday service. And he's been practicing his faith this way, and his life has been transformed. And he said, man, David, Judah, like if there's one thing that I'm thinking about as I see these people pass by, it's the fact that if we could get them to practice their faith for 5 minutes every day with Churchome, it's like, I think the world would be a different place. It's like, I genuinely think the world would be a different place. And so for me, the magic wand isn't, necessarily the way the app, listen, it's not going to be one ta-da moment and we're done. It's going to be continual development and ongoing optimization of that tool and how we do it. I think it's really, the goal would be getting individuals to engage with content that would lead them on the journey spiritually to grow in a really comprehensive way.
So let me ask you just off that question of, what does it look like for somebody to practice their faith for 5 minutes every day?
Tangibly with Churchome, that would be guided prayer. We have a brand new curated guided prayer every single day. It's about 5 to 7 minutes long. And we know that statistically, if people do that 4 times a week, their life starts to change. What they say they believe about God, or if they're in the exploration stage of their faith journey, the appetite to learn more about Jesus and who he is and what an actual relationship with him would look like starts to accelerate drastically. If somebody follows Jesus, their sense of connectedness to God increases drastically. The alignment of the faith values they state they have to the actuality of the implications of those faith values being lived out in their daily life starts to come into alignment. So the Trojan horse, if you will, or the front door for Churchome would be guided prayer, 100%.
Who writes
from
those?
That place we goes. We have a team that does it. So I do some, Judah does some, Chelsea does some. There's a bunch of our team that will do it. Obviously, doing 30 new ones every single month is a significant undertaking, right? Because there's a recording component, there's a video component, there's people are going to see some new features with our app when it comes to guided prayer, which I'm really excited about. So I'm not going to fully spoil it, but I think the experience is going to be so much more encompassing of helping somebody grow holistically in their faith when it comes to the demonstration of the scripture that's being talked about. And it's really just taking a moment in the chaos of the day to center yourself and connect with God. So that would be what that 5-minute moment would look like with the Churchome.
So in here, this is getting into yellow area. Just walk with me for a second. Have you, or would you use an AI to help with the creation or writing of those guided prayers?
Absolutely not against it. Now, I think, when we have AI write, curate, all that, so much about it too is around theological emphasis. If we're not careful, the way in which we pray, one of the benefits from my perspective about guided prayer is 2 things. Number one, our prayers tend to be very individualistic, right? I also, as somebody who's been following Jesus for a couple of decades now, tend to pray the same way every day. So guided prayer has helped me in having somebody else guide me through a prayer that isn't typical to the way that I would pray myself. It also helps to center me and focus me on the scripture and other things. In addition, it's also a communal prayer, right? Our faith in the Western society has become so individualistic. Remember, our whole community are praying these prayers together on a daily basis. So there's a sense of community oneness that's happening with these as well. Theological emphasis is a big thing, because if we're not careful, a lot of us will make its way into our prayer, and I don't think that we are to be the centerpiece of our prayer. I think Jesus is, and God is. So I think human beings have a hard enough time keeping theological emphasis points in accordance, and even I do when it comes to writing that level of content and that amount of content. So, but I do think it can absolutely be leveraged. I think there's always a human editing tool though that's needed within that. But can AI give you a prompt that you then take, and then you take that and you utilize that? Absolutely, why not?
It's one of those things where I ask that question with sensitivity, because I guarantee there are people who are listening who, when you ask that question, their skin just kind of goes, oh, I'm not so sure about that. And that's where just saying is that, to your point of the idea that it is a part of the process, but it is not the whole process. It is a co-pilot, a friend, a helper, a tool, but not the whole thing itself, which I think what you said makes total sense.
Exactly. I mean, we were on vacation this summer, and I was like, gosh, I'm really bad at I like to just kind of fly by the seat of my pants on vacation. I don't like to plan. But I realized that we needed a little bit more planning. And so I used ChatGPT I'm like, just give me a plan for the next 7 days. Here's where we're at. Here's some of the things we've done, and yada, yada, yada. Now, I wasn't just going to take what it gave me and do whatever it said. I was obviously going to take it, vet it, edit it, see what was applicable to us. And in a similar way, right? We employ research assistants a lot of times when we're studying the scriptures, when it comes to writing messages and other things. These are outside sources that are helping prompt us, and we're taking that information and then running it through our filter and our lens to deliver the message. I think in a similar way, this is a tool, right? Similar to the way a research assistant would be. In fact, I think, the level of information that some of these tools can have access to are far greater than our human capacity. And so if leveraged the correct way, it could be a much more effective way to run research. So
definitely.
it's all about how, right? So,
and I love that you brought that example, because I've read stories, recently, and they're coming across our newsfeed all the time of church let ChatGPT, run the service, and they did this, and part of me is thinking like you're doing it wrong, because that's like, to your example of it's as if we'll write a story that said David Kroll let ChatGPT plan his entire vacation, and you would never do that. That's silly. You would use ChatGPT as a tool, and you're not gonna just do what it says. It's a silly concept.
That would be like a wild experiment, right? That wouldn't be the way I would run. That'd be like, babe, let's do a date night. Let's just do whatever ChatGPT says for fun. But like, let's be honest, that's not the way we're going to live our life.
I think of if anyone out there has watched The Office, there's one of my, just a classic scene is Dwight and Michael Scott were in a car following GPS, and the GPS told them to turn right, and Michael drove right into a lake. And one of those things where he's like, that's what the GPS told me to do. And it's kind of like that concept of, hello, the GPS is a tool. You should not drive into a lake. And so
it's a means, not an end. I mean, and there's many means, right? There's one tool, there's multiple tools. There's, in the same way that a theologian would use logos, right? Which is a concordance digitally of a bunch of information, a bunch of different commentaries and biblical literature across centuries, all brought in a way that is using technology, right, to bring those things in a very easily searchable way. It's helped. So technology it's once again, it's a tool. I think when it becomes the end, that's when we start to have issues.
Yeah. Well, let's land the plane here, land our AI piloted plane here. And just with one quick tip, a ChatGPT tip. So you mentioned that ChatGPT is a favorite AI tool. How about share one thing other than planning your vacations and doing exactly what ChatGPT tells you to do? What is one fun thing that you do that's useful with ChatGPT?
I don't use it as often as it may seem in this conversation. So, I would say, listen, I'm also not the guy that is still comfortable yet, like letting ChatGPT know too much about my personal life. But one of the fun things that I've had is finding certain things. So like, hey, can you write this in this tone, right? Mm-hmm. Or giving it, I would say the biggest tip I would have with ChatGPT is give it context. And you cannot over contextualize. So a lot of times I will give it context, and I'll say, hey, ask me 7 questions that would give you context for the way that I would want myself to come across. So I did that. And I've done that for fun a couple times with even teams that I've worked with at Churchome. Let's say it's been on social media, or for example, right? It's like, hey, let's come up with a social media plan. But I will ask ChatGPT to ask me, say, hey, ask me 20 questions that will give you context to XYZ. So ask the asker. It would basically be flipping the script, right? Similarly to what I did a second ago with movies and the podcast. If you just, and then just don't stop until you feel like ChatGPT's asked you a sufficient amount of questions, you'll be actually pretty shocked at how good some of the stuff that can come out of that tool is.
Yeah. That's what you could say. I am a COO of a church that is primarily online. Acting as this person, how could I, think through ... That's a crazy thing is you never know, like the answers that it comes up with. Sometimes it's really awesome. It's really interesting.
It's true. And a lot of times it's garbage, but sometimes it's awesome.
Yes, that is true. Yeah. So, well, listen, it's always fun to meet another David. I always like to cheer for other Davids. Let me ask you this: on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being terrible, 5 being awesome, how much do you like that your name is David?
Oh, 5. I love it.
I like being called David too.
I'm of Jewish heritage, and so I grew up Jewish, and so for me, I think even taking a look within the scriptures and the Bible, and taking a look at my namesake and even the meaning of the name David. I love it. I'm thankful. And my parents named my brother Jonathan, so it's also very cool. Which I love. My brother is one of my best friends. So shout out to my parents. I'm grateful.
Yeah, they get a gold star. So good job to them.
And one of my best friends is also named David. So I'm just can't get enough of David. So great to meet you, and thank you again for having me on.
Yeah. Yep. All right. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks, David.